In this video, I'm going to discuss how to zero your tactical rifle. I'll discuss how different distances affect your point of impact, my preferred distance to zero from, and a few bonus tips at the end, so stay tuned.
Yeah, the other team's moving in the background,
Welcome back, Carlos here with Range 11 Tactical. On this channel, we create content full of useful tips, techniques, and/or drills just like this one to help you build and/or expand your tactical knowledge base. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. Okay, before we get into the actual process, let's discuss what zeroing means, or what's actually happening when we say we're zeroing our rifle. It's nothing more than intersecting our bullet's trajectory once it leaves the barrel with our line of sight at a very specific point and/or distance in space. There are three main things that we need to understand when it comes to zeroing. First, the second our bullet leaves the barrel, it's dropping, right? That's just laws of physics and gravity. Thus, rifle manufacturers actually cant your barrel slightly upward in order to compensate for that, right? So your bullet actually travels in an arc once it leaves your barrel. That's point number one. Point number two is any optic we mount on our rifle will go straight. The line of sight is straight out. It cannot and does not curve such as the bullet trajectory does. Thus, point number three, zeroing is nothing more than bringing or adjusting our optics line of sight to intersect, right, that bullet's trajectory at a very specific point and or distance in space, right? Your bullet will travel in that same arc every single time, so we use our sights as a reference point in order to make accurate shots down the road. So that's what zeroing actually means and what we're doing when we zero our rifle. Okay, let's discuss a few common distances to zero from and how they affect your point of impact. Also, I'll throw out the disclaimer, yes, barrel length, bullet weight, twist rate, and several other factors will affect your bullet's trajectory and thus have different points of impact, but in general, they will be close to what I'm discussing, and more importantly, you'll understand the concept. So, the most common distances for tactical rifles with red dot optics are going to be your 25 meter zero, 36 meter zero, or 50 meter zero. Anything past 50 meters with a red dot, it's kind of hard to see the red dot. That's kind of impractical, right? However, if your carbine does have a magnified optic, then you can elect to go out at further distances. But for this video, I'm going to focus on the two most common distances, which is the 25 meter zero and the 50 meter zero. Starting with the 50 meter zero, which is, by the way, my preferred distance to zero from. I like the 50 because anything from 50 to about 200 meters, my bullet trajectory is actually pretty flat. It will only be about 2.5 inches high at the apex of that arc. So basically, I can hold center mass on any target from 50 to 200 and will most likely get a hit. Second is the 25 meter zero. This is probably the most common zero distance in the military, as opposed to the 50 meter zero where we had 2.5 inches at the apex of that arc. This one will have about 10 inches at about 180, which is the apex of that arc there. So now it's a little bit more complicated because I got to know my holds. If I'm shooting out at distances about 150, 180, I have to hold a little bit low because my bullet trajectory is going to be high, and if I'm a little bit off to the left or right, I could potentially miss. Again, both are great distances to zero from. Just got to know your holds if you are doing a 25 meter zero. The downside to the 50 is right at 200, I'm going to a steep dive and I'm going to be really low on anything past 200. So just as long as you know that, you can kind of pick the best distance that works for you. Okay, first let's understand that zeroing is an administrative function. It's not a tactical drill or anything like that. So be as comfortable as possible, right? Ditch the body armor, the plate carrier, all that tactical gear, all that nonsense. The more precise and comfortable we are during the zero process, the more accurate we'll be. So that's point number one. Second, zero from the prone position if your range allows it, right? This will allow more points of contact with the ground, thus being more stable. And third, use something to stabilize the rifle. It could be a backpack, it could be a sandbag, a log, anything to stabilize the rifle. I personally have bipods that I actually attach to the bottom of my rifle specifically for zero, and then I take them off. If you don't have any of those, use the bottom of the magazine as that other point of contact to stabilize the rifle. Okay, now you're all set. It's time to fire some rounds downrange. Take your time and follow the basic rifle fundamentals, right? Good steady position, control your breathing, nice smooth trigger pulls to the rear. Be as accurate as possible as you can during this process, as it'll pay dividends down the road. Now, when you go to fire rounds, you want to fire anywhere from 3 to 5 rounds on every string before you go down and check your rounds or make any adjustments to your optics, right? The reason for this is if you fire just one round and make adjustments, you're going to start chasing your zero, right? It could have been a flyer, it could have been something you did, or even the ammunition, as it may have some deviation in it. So it's good practice to fire at least 3 rounds on every string of fire. And then once you've done that, you simply go down range and you triangulate your shots, right? You're going to use the center of that triangulation to calculate your adjustments, and you simply go back to your rifle and make those adjustments, and that's the zeroing process. Basically, you're going to repeat that until now your bullet's trajectory and your optics line of sight intersect at that chosen distance and point of impact. To give you an example, let's say my shot group is 3 inches to the right and 3 inches high. When I go back to my rifle, I'm going to make the adjustments to my optic to bring that 3 inches down and 3 inches left in order to intersect those 2 points of impact, right? That trajectory and my optics line of sight. Also, this is a little bit more than zeroing, but you need to understand this. If I've chosen to zero at 50 meters, for example, anything before the 50 meters, I'm still below. This is my optics line of sight. This is my bullet trajectory. I'm still below that point of impact. So anything before the 50, I'm going to be a little bit low, right? It's called mechanical offset, or your height over bore. So this is kind of simple to figure out. Once you're done zeroing, simply walk down range, go to the 10 or the 7-yard line, and take a couple shots, and then calculate how many inches below your point of impact you are, and you'll know your mechanical offset for that weapon system. All right, a few bonus tips. First and foremost, if you are zeroing a brand new optic, you pulled it from the box, slapped it on your rifle, and let's say you're going to zero from the 50. If you take your first shots and you're not even on paper, don't even bother making any adjustments. Simply get up real close, get on paper, make those gross adjustments, and then walk your way back until you're at your desired distance, right? Make those ballpark adjustments and then fine tune it once you get to your desired distance. That's a bonus tip number 1. Bonus tip number 2, if you have a spotting scope, right? This is going to save you a lot of trips back and forth, right? Especially if you're zeroing from the 50. So I'll make my first couple of strings of fire. I'll use my spotting scope to make those major adjustments. And then I'll go out, mark them out, and make those finer, fine-tune adjustments, right? All right, those were my tips on how to zero your rifle. As always, if you found this information valuable, leave me a comment. Consider subscribing to catch my latest videos. With that, stay safe and train hard.